guys, a couple of days ago Henry and I did a video about the 5 vegetable seeds that we were most interested and excited about growing in this year. Then I did a video about the 5 annual seeds that I was most interested in growing for flowers. And now I'd like to do a video on perennials. Now, the big deal with perennials for me is I like things that come back. Now, some of our annuals come back. Our marigolds reseed. I sometimes still do start a few seedlings, but mostly I just move ones that showed up someplace that's inconvenient or that were too crowded. Our violas are one of the plants that comes back every year, and they actually overwinter here. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for plants that will come back every year, and we already do have a bunch of them in the yard, but we're trying to add every year a few more so that we can just put some little hot spots of color in between them and have a pretty self-sustaining garden. So the first thing I'm going to plant this year is something I haven't planted in quite a while, columbines. And I just happened to be at a big box store the other day and was captivated by the columbines there. I had been debating it previously when I was doing my seed purchasing. Somehow managed to resist the urge, but I gave up and decided to buy them anyway. And this is a color mix, which I have done before. When we lived in Massachusetts, I had very successfully planted columbines in a couple of the garden beds close to the house, and they naturalized and just would come back every year, and it was just so wonderful to be out there mowing the lawn or something and suddenly realize you've got some new flowers, and they are such a delicate, very cool flower. So I decided I was going to do it again. They're based on a very tough perennial native seed, so what the heck, we'll give it a try and see what works. The other one that we are going to be growing this year is a lupin, which is also a native seed. Now these have been improved, quote unquote. This is Seed Savers Exchange seeds. And these are tall and come in a bunch of different colors. The native lupins in our area are all bluish, with very few exceptions. Once in a while we see some white ones, and they're usually up in the mountains. But I'm going to give these guys a try and see if we can get them to the point where they come back every year. I really like the look of what they call the English country garden, where you have clumps and clusters of all kinds of different colors and heights and leaf textures and everything else, and that's what we're going for. So lupins. The third thing I'm going to grow, I grew last year, and it is a dianthus. My mom had dianthus in her yard, and if you don't know anything about them, they're an amazingly tough little plant. They come in a whole stack of different forms. They are perennials and can come back under some of the most terrible circumstances. My mom had some poor little dianthus that she planted in soil that was way too sunny. You know, it was a location that was way too sunny and way too sandy for the type of dianthus she planted there. And yet somehow every year they managed to come back anyway. And I've always loved them ever since I was a little bitty kid. So I started growing some a couple of years ago. I just picked up some at the big box store. And then last year I tried Volcano. Now, the Volcano mix that Johnny's carries, the best way to describe it is they put out a stem with a big ball of flowers on it. And this ball of flowers seems to bloom for months. And I honestly haven't sat there and tried to figure out how long it blooms for. But it just seems like when you look at it closely, there's always new flowers there. And the result is this amazing display that's really long-lived. They don't make what I would call a great cutting flower, but although they say they do. But mine tended to be a little too short in terms of the stem. But I may be able to fix that with a little better location or something. But they were amazing. They bloomed all summer. A couple of them got eaten by some gophers. So I decided I really wanted to plant a whole new section of them and just see what I could possibly do. I experimented by planting just a couple last year and just adored them. They were amazing. So definitely going to be doing dianthus again. And we have some dianthus. It will be interesting to see if they come back near the front door that were left over from something I bought at a big box store years ago, and they still come back sometimes. The fourth thing I want to try again this year is sweet peas. Sweet peas can be either annuals or perennials. And perennials just means, by the way, and I should have said that at the beginning, that they come back every year by themselves. If I forgot to say that, I don't know. And I have grown both. Last year, I've also had some batches of seeds that were terrible that I had randomly picked up at box stores and things like that, and where I got almost no germination. Last year, I bought some Perennial sweet pea seeds, and they did well. And I had a lovely little vine that climbed up a makeshift trellis that I built for it, and it bloomed all summer, and then it gopherated at the end of the summer. So I'm determined to get the gophers out of there and put a bunch more in. My mom had sweet peas, and hers were perennials. We didn't ever plant anything. It was, just that plant that came back at a specific location every year. Now hers grew quite tall. I want to say at least 4 or 5 feet tall, and they were sort of a bluish color. And I don't remember hers having any smell, and that's been a big topic of conversation among people who like wildflowers and cultivated flowers, is that for a while there they were breeding sweet peas purely for the flowers, and they were ignoring the smell. Now some of the newer varieties that have come out, they've brought the smell back. So it'll be interesting, because I don't remember my mom's having smell. Maybe they did and I just never sniffled, but I always was smelling flowers, so I'd sort of be surprised if I missed that one. And the fifth thing I'm going to grow this year again is hollyhocks. Now hollyhocks are technically not a perennial. They're actually a biennial. That means that the first year they grow leaves, and the second year they grow flowers. But some of our seeds here that we have saved for several years in a row don't seem to be following those rules very well. Our hollyhocks will sometimes winter over even after they have bloomed, and assuming that they don't get eaten by a gopher, they usually are there again the second year, and sometimes even a third year. So they're long-lived enough that I'm willing to put them in the perennial category. We have an assortment of flowers that have come from several different sources over the years. I tried growing multiple colors and got some pretty wimpy ones for a while there, but I also have some that come back with a very deep burgundy. They're just gorgeous, and big flowers that last for quite a while. Very tough plants. I was first introduced really to hollyhocks when I lived in New Mexico. They were fairly commonly grown almost as weeds in people's yards. They would just sort of pop up and people let them grow, and they didn't require much tending, and we've discovered it works the same way here. They make some very fancy ones that have big fancier flowers that have lots of extra petals and stuff like that, and at some point I had experimented with one of those, but basically they've all gone back to a simpler flower form now in the yard, and I'm just going to be planting some of the seeds that we've saved. And we'll see what comes up, because you'd never know. I did get some seeds last year from my sister-in-law that are a sort of an unusual pale, delicate yellow. So I may try some of those. I tried planting some last year, and I don't know what happened, but they didn't seem to come up. But I'm going to try again this year, and hollyhocks will definitely be an important part of our garden. Now, I mentioned that we do have a bunch of perennials in the garden. And another one I'm going to try and get a hold of this year, I had lousy luck last year. I've tried to grow them from seeds a couple of times, is Rudbeckia. And I just have never had any great success with growing them from seeds. And the last couple of times I tried to buy them in a big box store or a garden shop or something, they were out of the plants. But I'm determined, because Rudbeckia are black-eyed Susans, and my grandma used to have those, and I just adored those things. When I was a little bitty kid, she had these monster piles of black-eyed Susans that came up every year, and it was just very cool, very cheerful, and very long blooming. So once you've got them in place, they just come back every year. The things that come back in our yard every year are California poppies, and those can act as perennials in our area. Sometimes they last multiple years. Mexican poppies are perennials. Violas, also called Johnny Jump-Ups, they self-seed, and it becomes sort of difficult to tell whether they're almost a perennial or whether they're just self-seeding with so much abundance that, you just never seem to lose them. We have tickweed, which is a perennial, and we have mums, which are perennials. We have wood violets, which are also perennials. They were a gift from somebody a long time ago, and actually the violas came in with those. I recognized when I got the pots that she didn't know the difference, but I did. But that's okay because I love violas. We have calendulas that I planted myself. Those have orange flowers. They tend to be very susceptible to downy mildew. So I sort of cut back. I used to have a lot of them here, and I cut back on that. They will overwinter here and sometimes not even lose their leaves. But the result of that is that they sometimes also keep their bugs. So it's kind of hard to get rid of the spider mites with them, and they seem to be something of a reservoir for the spider mites. So I kind of eliminated a lot of that a couple of years ago. Our lavender is awesome, and we have big batches of that. Sage, echinacea, we have the purpurea, which is the purple cone flowers. Big flowers that even once the petals are ripped off, the purple cone is kind of a cool looking thing. And those are very long-lived flowers, and they change color slightly over the time. We also have a lot of native daisies that I've encouraged, and I'd have to re-look up the names for them. I don't think any of them are technically daisies, but they look like daisies. We also have some native asters that just sort of wandered in, and I always encourage that kind of stuff when I see something I like that doesn't have stickers. And then we also have snapdragons that came in as potted plants 6-8 years ago, and I still have a couple of them in the yard that come back every year. One of them almost looks like a little bush. It's so woody, but they always have a bunch of flowers over the course of the summer, so I just kind of leave them be there. They're not in the way. I hope this inspires you guys to take a look at what flowers you really like and what makes sense to add. The advantage of perennials is that they're just there. I grew up in a yard that had flowers that came on at different times of the year, and there was almost no time when there wasn't something in the yard blooming, maybe the very end of summer sometimes. But then the chrysanthemums would come in, and my mom had a magnificent collection of chrysanthemums. So, yeah, there's a real advantages to it, and it lets us have the beauty we desire in our gardens without constantly having to replant something new. And of course, if you want to replant something new, who am I to say you're wrong? But I hope this inspires you, and have a great growing year. See you next time. Bye.